we have a mystery guest. We have an exciting mystery guest that I think you're all going to appreciate. And I'm going to ask, I want you guys to try to help this person. He's got real problems. And so at the very end, I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk to this person and see whether you can come up with the answer to his problem. It is a he. He's got a serious problem. And I'm thinking at the end of this deal, you'll be able to help him out. Okay? So, be tuned for that. Get ready to do a little service in AA. Okay? So here we go. I'm going to start reading some stuff. I'll comment here and there. This is about emotional sobriety. So here we go. Let me read this. The attainment of emotional sobriety. The attainment of emotional sobriety requires discipline, patience, and sometimes a pinch of desperation and punishment, adjusted according to the defiance of each individual. The 12 and 12 says our chief characteristic is defiance. Waiting patiently through an hour of praise music is a measuring stick of my desire to change and willingness to surrender. It's interesting. I've sat through a lot of meetings. You ever sat through a meeting where you don't like it? You're not interested in what they have to say? I've sat through a lot of meetings like that where they probably said some good stuff. I don't know, but I was sort of bored. It wasn't helping me, but I sat there anyway. Humility is the basis for all the steps. This is quite frankly out of step 6 and 7. Humility of the 12 and 12. Humility is the basis for all the steps. The attainment of that quality is necessary for long-term contented sobriety. These concepts are in the Big Book, in the 12 and 12, steps 6 and 7, and throughout our literature and scripture. Check out James 1, Psalms 1, Sermon on the Mount, Book of Romans, and how it works. And check out your own heart. Okay, additional steps to a change. One of the things I've been talking about is the 15 steps to get to the fellowship of the Spirit. Additional steps. There may be additional steps. There are additional steps. In my opinion, I've been sober. I'm in my 45th year of sobriety, and I'm watching what's going on here, just like Bill Wilson was watching what's going on. And there may be some additional steps to be rocking from mere physical sobriety. Here's the additional steps I found that are in the Big Book, actually. One, you got to be ready. Doing the steps without being ready is not going to carry you along. You got to be ready to do the steps and accept the seriousness of the steps. How do I know that? Because the Big Book, it says, if you want what we have and you have the willingness to go to any length to get it, then you're ready. That's the only time you're ready. You got to want what we have and have a willingness to go to any length to get it. And so I guess the real question here is, what's your we? What's your he? For me, it's what's your he or what's your we? Who or what are you focused on that you want what they have? Or maybe you just want what you used to have. Or maybe you just want what you'd like to get. Maybe you'd like what you think the people in AA have, all the people have. Maybe you just want to stay sober, not drink. That's not a bad thing. Focus. God must be the central fact of your life, of my life, not conforming myself to the world. I don't necessarily want what most of the people want. Listen, I love AA. I love the people in AA. There, but for the grace of God goes I know it's not Well People's Anonymous. I go to an AA meeting and I love the people. I try to help as best I can. I don't necessarily want what they have. There may be certain people in AA that I want what they have. I want what Dr. Bob has. I wanted what Ray O'Keefe had. I wanted what John Glenn had. There are certain people in my life that came into my life that I wanted what they had. I I was willing going to annulate to get it. But I don't want what everybody has in AA. Conviction and faith in God. And here's the third step that has to be developed. I have to be convinced that God lives in my heart and mind in a way that is miraculous. I met two guys up in the Blue Ridge Mountains before a thing I was doing up there, and we had dinner, and they said to me that they don't believe in miracles. I said, how can you be in AA and not believe in miracles? You know, you're sober, that's a miracle. They didn't believe in miracles. Being convinced that he lives in my heart and mind in a way which is indeed miraculous, doing for me what I cannot do for myself. I'm not going to criticize him. I'm just telling him, I can tell right away we're both sober, and we, to a certain extent, we spoke the same language, but there was no question about the fact that we belonged to a different fellowship. There was no question that I belonged to a fellowship they knew nothing about. And they knew they belonged to a fellowship that I didn't really want to be in. So, you know, they knew nothing about miracles. My whole life's a miracle. All I do is see miracles. I don't know what fellowship you belong to. I implore you to belong to the miraculous fellowship, the fellowship of the Spirit. There's some stuff out of the Old Testament. It's about 3,000 or 4,000 years old or something like that. I'm not even sure. This is Psalm 21, written by King David. He was in all the papers. You remember him, killed Goliath. Here we go. I think he was convinced. He was convinced, and he was still a banana. He loved the Lord, and he was still fooling around with married women and stuff. But that's, I don't put him down there, but for the grace of God goes I. But he still loved God. He was trying. He was doing the best he can, like we try. Well, like we try. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? This guy sounds like me, or I sound like him. You know, one guy once told me outside a parking lot of an AA meeting, he said, you know, my sponsor says, you're a good speaker. He says, but you talk too much about God. So me and David have a lot in common. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and your going, both now and forevermore. Do you believe that? I believe that. I know that's true. I know that's true even when I get into trouble, even when I'm worried. Psalm 1. Blessed is the one who does not walk in the step of the wicked, or stand in the way of the sinners, the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers. Mockers. Do you think we have mockers in AA? Do we have people in AA that have God derangement syndrome? You know, have you heard of an alcoholic that has a God derangement syndrome? For those who delight, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night, focuses. In other words, God, the Word, the book, is the central fact of their lives. God is the central fact of your life. We meditate on it day and night. We're always thinking about it. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. That's a pretty neat life, don't you think? That's a good. I like that attitude. I've been working on that attitude for 45 years. Step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. So this is the step that separates the men from the boys. This is the separation step. This is the step that separates the group of people called Alcoholics Anonymous who have desire to stop drinking from the group of people that are rocketed in the fourth dimension and are belonging to the Fellowship of the Spirit. The Fellowship of the Spirit is mentioned on the last page of the big book. You will meet some of us in the Fellowship of the Spirit. Not all of us, some of us in the Fellowship of the Spirit. So this is the step that separates the men from the boys, so declares a well-loved clergyman who happens to be one of A's greatest friends. He goes on to explain that any person capable of enough willingness and honesty to try repeatedly step 6 on all his faults without any reservations, we want what he has. We're willing to go to any length to get it. No reservations, whatever. Has indeed come a long way spiritually and is therefore entitled to be called a man or a woman who is sincerely trying to grow in the image and likeness of his own creator. That's the definition. That's how you know somebody's involved in this Fellowship of the Spirit stuff. They're trying to grow in the image likeness of their own creator. And if you don't have an image or a likeness of your own creator, then, well, how is it possible for you to grow in his image and likeness if you don't know what you're trying to get to? If you don't have an image in your mind. No, at first my image was, I suppose, my first sponsor, Bob Sullivan. Then my second sponsor, Joe Snyder. Without question, my third sponsor, John Glenn, was a man of God and a humble man, an incredible man. I said, if I could have what John Glenn has. If only I could have what John Glenn has. So how about this? How about this one? You guys want this one? Anybody here trapped in emotional instability? Anybody here go up and down and backwards and forwards? Anybody here second guess themselves? Find themselves overwhelmed by life and the problems of life? Hey, anybody here, you know how it says the wrongdoings of others, real and imagined? Anybody here ever worry about shit that hasn't even happened, that may never happen? You ever worry about things in your past and things in your future and things that, 9 out of 10 of the things in your life are never going to happen, and the one thing that does happen will probably happen differently. Everybody feel like every day you wake up in life is just one problem after another problem after another problem after another problem. You're just besieged by the problems of this world, and you don't know how to escape. You're not drinking, but you don't know. You feel like your mind is. You ever say to yourself, I got to stop thinking about this crap? You ever try to tell yourself to stop thinking about something? You ever try to convince yourself, I got to stop thinking about this stuff? And then next thing you know, you start thinking about it again? You ever feel like you're a slave to your own brain? But you're going to meetings, right? You're working the steps, but you're like whacked out, Well, when you have that going for you, what you don't have is something called equanimity. I never knew what equanimity was. Well, I never really had to know what it was because I didn't have it. Until one of my sponsors, Joe Snyder, used the word equanimity. And I was a lawyer. I was a wordsmith. I don't think I ever used the word equanimity in a statement or a sentence. Let me read you this part and see whether or not you're interested in some equanimity. Whether you think this has something to do with, that rocket ship ride where you'll be rocketed in the fourth dimension of existence, experience much of heaven and know peace. How would you all like to know peace? How would you like to know peace? How would you like to live a life where you're not running around trying to manufacture excitement by going to every party in the world or spending money you don't have, to buy things you don't even need to impress people you don't even like? How would you like to live a life where you don't really have to do much? You can just sit around and be at peace with yourself, and that'd be okay. So if you're interested in equanimity, let's at least define the term equanimity, see whether you guys would like it. Equanimity is a state of stability and composure that is undisturbed by the experience or response to emotions, i.e., feelings, pain, or pleasures that may cause others to lose the balance of their mind. You ever feel like you're losing the balance of your mind? Let's keep on going down. Composure, balance of their mind, composure, especially under tension or strain. It means evenness of temper. You ever feel like you're not in composure, that your feelings are running your life and driving you crazy? Well, it's probably a short drive. How would you like to, have you ever, what do you think it would be like to live a life without fear? What would it be like if you could stop worrying about what you think other people are thinking about you and feeling about you, let's say for a day? What would that be? How about a week? How about a month? How about for a year? What if you could stop worrying about what people think about you for a year? Would that be okay with you? Yeah, you think A is just for drinking, right? Let's keep on going. As we developed further, we discovered that the best possible source of emotional stability is God himself. All right, listen, this is out of conference-approved material. Not that I care what the conference says, but the guy with the longest time in the conference said 15 years. I'm not pulling rank, but, I've learned a lot between 15 years and 45. That's the 30-year difference. I learned a lot, in the last 30 years. But there may be even more than the conference screamed up. You know what I mean? I love that line from the book of Hamlet, first scene, there's more in this world than meets in your philosophy. I mean, there's a lot of, I knew everything, but there was a lot of stuff I didn't know. I learned a lot of stuff between years 15 and 45. So the best source of emotional stability is God. Did you know that? You probably thought it was the fourth step, right? You probably thought the best source of emotional stability was helping other people, right? Those are just tools. No, the best source of emotional stability is God himself. Whoever he is. You think it makes a difference who he is? You ever hear somebody say, don't worry about the God thing? The best source of emotional stability is God himself. We got thousands of people running around today say, don't worry about the God thing. No wonder people are crazy. They have a lot of doubt. Doubt, D-O-U-B-T, is the worst thing that can happen to an alcoholic. Doubt engenders fear. Doubt is the worst thing that can happen to Alcoholics Anonymous, and probably 80 to 90% of the people in AA are filled with doubt about God or about the God thing, because everybody in AA says don't talk about it, and they'll talk about resentments and everything. They don't want to talk about God. So let's keep on going. We found that dependence upon his perfect justice. Whose perfect justice? Oh, God's perfect justice. His forgiveness, his love was healthy where nothing else would work. That's the 12 and 12, written by those guys, written by Bill Wilson when he had about 19 years. That's pages 114 through 116, the 12 and 12. So apparently Bill Wilson was saying God is the answer. He felt even more strongly than that after 20 years, but that's another story we'll go into later. Keep on going. This is from the story, he sold himself short. I put this in here because when I read this story, when I had less than 5 years sobriety, I said to myself, man, I wish I could have that. I wish I could have that. I wonder if you guys want what this guy had. I think he had equanimity. Here's a guy who had equanimity. Sometimes you don't understand the definition. You have to meet somebody who has it. You with me? You got to meet somebody who has it. That's it. You got to want what he or she has and are willing to go to any length to get it. So this latest part of my life has had a purpose, not in great things accomplished, but in daily living. The courage to face each day has replaced the fears and uncertainties of earlier years. Do you have any fears or uncertainties in your life? Anybody have any fears and uncertainties in your life? What would your life be like if you didn't have fears, anxiety, and uncertainties? Would that be a good thing for you? I have stopped tilting at windmills and instead have tried to accomplish little daily tasks, unimportant in themselves, but tasks that are an integral part of living fully. How would you all like to live fully? With derision, contempt, and pity were once shown me, I now enjoy the respect of many people. Where once I had casual acquaintances, all of whom were fair weather friends, I now have a host of friends who accept me for what I am. Wouldn't that be great? To not have to prove yourself to people, to have people accept you for exactly who you are, who love you for exactly who you are, even if you're a banana, even if you're a little crazy. And over my AA years, I have made many real, honest, sincere friendships that I'll always cherish. I'm rated as a modestly successful man. My stock of material goods isn't great. I don't have a lot of money. But I have a fortune in friendships, in courage, in self-assurance. How would you like to have a fortune in friendships, courage, self-assurance, and an honest appraisal in your own abilities? How would you like to have that stuff going on? Above all, I have gained the greatest thing accorded to any man, the greatest thing accorded to any man. So let's see what could that be? Let's see. The love and understanding of a gracious God who has lifted me from the alcoholic scrap heap to a position of trust where I have been able to reap the rich rewards that come from showing a little love for others and from serving them as I can. Listen, I got some good news and I got some bad news. The bad news is this is really the only thing AA has to offer you. This paragraph is the only thing AA has. AA can't offer you a car, a lot of money, can't offer you good looks, can't offer you a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a husband or a wife. The only thing you can get out of AA is you can be lifted from the alcoholic scrap heap into a position of trust where you rich rewards which come from showing love for others and for serving them as I can. Now here's the good news. If you're into that stuff, if that sounds interesting to you, if you want that deal, it's available in Alcoholics Anonymous, but you have to have emotional sobriety. You're going to have to attain emotional sobriety. So does that sound appetizing to anybody at this meeting? So if you would like to have that stuff, that's what this meeting is all about. It's not about not drinking, because people that get this stuff, they don't drink. Why would they drink? If you had that line, if you have the love and understanding of a gracious God who has lifted you from the alcoholic scrap heap to a position of trust where you have been able to reap the rich rewards that come from showing a little love for others and from serving them as you can, why would you ever drink? You're like at peace with yourself. You've got equanimity. There ain't no drinking. There's no crying in baseball. That's it. You don't drink. That's the answer. Let's keep on going. Do not conform to the pattern of this world. Do not conform to the pattern of this world. You know, sometimes when what's the pattern of this world? What do you guys think the pattern of this world is? Make a lot of money, have a lot of sex, get a boyfriend, a girlfriend, get married, have a house, get a car, lose weight, get fit, be attractive. What's the pattern of this world? Be smart, have people like you, everybody like you, don't have anybody dislike you, get everything you want. What's the pattern of this world? What do you guys see the pattern of this world? Don't conform yourself to that. Do you know that sometimes hey, listen, let me tell you something. Don't get mad at me. I'm just telling you what. Do you know sometimes you can see the pattern of this world in Alcoholics Anonymous? You know why you can see the pattern of this world in AA? Because AA is composed of alcoholics. One of the problems we have. AA is composed of alcoholics. And many of these alcoholics are trying to conform themselves to the pattern of this world. They're worried about money, property, prestige, and romance. So you can bet your bottom dollar that if you go to AA meetings, you're going to hear a lot that sounds like the pattern of this world, even if it's just the problems. You're going to have to learn how to somehow separate true AA and true faith from the pattern of this world. You're going to hear a lot of stuff that's going to sound attractive to you, but it's really going to be conforming to the pattern of this world. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and prove what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Yeah, you want to walk. If you don't change the direction that you're walking, you're going to wind up exactly where you're headed. So, be careful who you decide to conform to, because the men and women and the fellowship you hang around today is what you're going to change into. And the books you read is what you're going to change into. That's what you're going to conform to. And the books you read are going to depend upon the people you hang out with. That's just a fact of life. Let's keep on going. If any of you, this is the book of James. Why is the book of James important? Well, Dr. Bob says the books we found absolutely essential were 1 Corinthians 13, Sermon on the Mount, and the book of James. So this is from the book of James, so you might want to check it out if you want what we have. If any of you lacks wisdom, how would you guys like to have wisdom? You guys ever find yourself confused about anything? You ever call up your sponsor because you're confused? You ever don't call up your sponsor, you just sit around confused as to what to do? How would you like not to have confusion? How would you like to have wisdom? Where do you go to get wisdom? If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God. There he is again. I'm telling you, he shows up all over the place in AA. And they keep on telling me in AA, don't worry about the God thing. You ever hear anybody say, don't worry about the God thing, don't talk so much about God, you're killing newcomers? Maybe you're killing newcomers by not talking about God. You ever think about that? Maybe you're killing old timers by not talking about God. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Did you know that God will give you wisdom generously without finding fault? You don't have to be perfect. You can be a banana and God will give you wisdom. All you have to do is ask him. Did you know that? Wow. Oh, wait a second. There's a catch. Here's the catch. But when you ask God for wisdom, you must believe and not doubt. There's that doubt word again, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind, by the circumstances and feelings in his life. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Must get rid of our old ideas, or the result is nil. Half measures avail us nothing. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do. I would call that the opposite of equanimity. That's the opposite of equanimity. You don't want that. You don't want to be double-minded and unstable in all you do. So you've got to get rid of all doubt. So how do you get rid of all doubt? How do you do that when you're hanging around groups of people in AA, wonderful for Stop Drinking, where they don't want to talk about God because they have doubt? Okay, let's keep on going. Here's a poem one of my mentors gave me. The guy who gave me this was Pastor Carrie Miller. 10 years sober, when I asked for wisdom, They told me to go to Bible study so I could go and hang out with a fellowship of people that were focused on God. So I went there and I met Pastor Terry Miller, who's a godly, wonderful man who was never in doubt about his faith. And he gave me this poem. And so I'm going to read it. I'm going to give it to you. It describes me, quite frankly. It describes my life, to be honest with you. I walked life's path with an easy tread, had followed where comfort and pleasure led. You guys ever see comfort and pleasure? I walked life's path with an easy tread, had followed where comfort and pleasure led. And then by chance in a quiet place, I met my master face to face. With station and rank and wealth for a goal, with station and rank and wealth for a goal, much thought for my body, but none for my soul, I had entered to win this life's mad race when I met my master face to face. I had built my castles, reared them high, till their towers had pierced the blue of the sky. I had sworn to rule with an iron mace. They don't know who they're dealing with when I met my master face to face. I met him and knew him. Do you know him? Have you met him? I met him and I knew him. I blushed to see that his eyes full of sorrow were fixed on me. You ever have something called godly sorrow? I had godly sorrow. I'll tell you what it felt like. It felt like being ashamed of what I had become. It was not like self-pity. Self-pity is a whole different thing. It's like deathly. But I had become ashamed of what I had become. I met him and knew him and blushed to see that his eyes full of sorrow were fixed on me. Godly sorrow, becoming ashamed of what you had become. I'll tell you, the man who has godly sorrow, that leads to salvation. That leads to repentance of wanting to change so badly you'll do anything. That his eyes full of sorrow were fixed on me, and I faltered and I fell at his feet that day. While my castles vanished and melted away, melted, vanished, and in their place I saw nothing else but my master's face. And I cried aloud, oh, make me meet to follow the marks of thy wounded feet, like Bill Wilson said, if there is a God, let him show himself to me now. My thought is now for the souls of men. I have lost my life to find it again. Ever since alone in that holy place, my master and I stood face to face. I hope to God that one day you meet the master. God, I hope you guys meet the master, because there ain't no other way. Ain't no other way. Let's keep on going. Do not love the world or anything in the world. How do you do that? How do you stop loving the world when you're consumed by the things of this world and surrounded by them, and everybody else is running after them? Everybody else in your life seems to be running after the things of this world. I'll tell you how you get rid of them. Number one of the things to do is you make sure you don't hang out with people that are running in that direction. Don't hang out with people that are running in the direction of trying to gather up things in their lives. I can promise you this: when you have your funeral, we're all going to have our funeral. You're not going to have any U-Haul trucks behind it. You ain't taking nothing with you. If anyone loves this world, the love of the Father is not in him. If anyone loves this world, the love of the Father is not in him. I used to hang around the bar and we drink and we talk about, have you seen my new car? I just got a new job. I'm making more money. Have you seen this girl I'm with? We just talk about stuff. I was addicted to stuff. If anyone loves this world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh, the desires of your eyes, The pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away along with its desires. The world is passing away, keep on going. But whoever does the will of God remains forever. And I think, if I remember correctly, your job is to be of maximum service to God and other people. That's in 1 John. It's also in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Let's keep on going. What a coincidence. So this is Bill. Now listen, this is Bill Wilson. This is important. Remember, I was going to invite a guy. Remember, I said I was going to invite a guy over that's got real problems and see whether you could help him. I met this guy named Bill Wilson. He wrote a book called The Big Book. And what he said in the Big Book is, he said, here and there, once in a while, a former drinker says, I feel better, I look better, I'm having a better time. We laugh at such Sally. We know he's going to try the old game again because he's not happy with his sobriety. Soon he'll know loneliness as few do. He'll be at the jumping off place. He'll wish for the end. He'll wish for the end. We know he's going to drink again. So I met this guy named Bill Wilson, and he wrote me this letter here in 1958. He wrote it to me because he was looking for help. You know, I get a lot of Bill Wilsons. I get a lot of guys with 5, 10, 15, 20 years sobriety, 25 years, 30 years sobriety. I guess when you get old, I'm 76 years old, and, I've been around for a while. I guess when you get old, what you do is you look at things differently. Because what you see is there's not a lot of people with 45 years or 44 years and a half. And you notice that you get a lot of calls from people with 10 and 20 and 25 years where they're suffering. They're not happy. And we're not talking about people that are drinking. I'm talking about people that are sober people, that are going to meetings, that are sponsoring people. And you got a lot of calls from people like that, and they're sober physically, and they've got problems, and they're not happy. And so this is one of those people that call me up every day. And you notice that even sober people, old timers, are unhappy with their sobriety. So this guy, Bill Wilson, called me up. Have you guys gotten a call from Bill Wilson? I got one the other day. Here's the call. So I wrote, here it is. Here's the call. We got it written down. My call from Bill Wilson. Here it is. So this is what he told me. He says, I think that many old timers who are sober and the booze cure, they put it to the test. They still seem to not have found equanimity. They still lack emotional sobriety. They're like infants. They're like children. Did you know that? This is what Billy's telling. This is what Billy Wilson's telling me. The guy who wrote the book as Bill Sees It, the guy that everybody's walking around and talking about, and he really had his shit together. He didn't have his shit together. He was popping LSD at 19 years sobriety, for God's sakes, Dr. Bob has his crap together, I can tell you that. But who the hell thinks about Dr. Bob? You would have to read Dr. Bob, the good old timers, for that. No. So Billy wasn't doing that well. He called me up. He said, Russell, I see all these people that are old timers, and they're nuts, and I'm nuts. And he said, and he says, perhaps they will be the spearhead for the next major development in AA. He says, there's got to be something else going on in AA to help these guys. The development of much more real maturity and balance, which is to say humility. And I think I was talking about that in the 12 and 12. We talked about that humility thing, in our relationships with ourselves and with our fellows and with God. And with God, much more real maturity. What does he mean by real maturity? Maturity, that's like a word used when somebody's acting childish. And you say things like, and I often say things like this to 50-year-old men, when the hell are you going to grow up? Thumb-sucking crybaby. Those adolescent urges. I don't see any adolescents in this meeting. I think he's talking about emotionally adolescent. I think they just talk about, hey, you ever find yourself with feelings and emotions that pretty much are like the way you were when you were 17 and 18 years old? Yeah, you guys ever have like crushes, puppy love, or you ever like were attracted to women or men, or you ever have like these insane, intense emotions, feelings of loneliness and feelings that you're being rejected that you had when you were 17 and 18 years old? You ever have them now when you're 30 and 40 and 50 years old? You ever have that stuff going on? You know? Jesus, Andy's clapping about it. He's excited, you know. He says, I like those things. Those adolescent urges that so many of us have for top approval, perfect security, and perfect romance, urges quite appropriate for age 17, prove to be an impossible way of life when we are at age 47 or 57. Stop it. Stop it. Don't do that stuff. Yeah, I know. It's tough. When you're going to all your meetings, everything, but you can't stop with those feelings, right? You don't have equanimity. Since AA began, I've taken. Oh, by the way, I just want to, all this stuff I'm talking about. Do they talk about that at your AA meetings? They talk about this stuff at your AA meetings? They talk about any of this stuff at your AA meetings? Oh, I wonder why. Well, the newcomer is the most important person. The newcomer is the most important person in the group. You know what that means? That means if you're not a newcomer, if you've been around 10 or 15 years, don't look to get any help with your problem necessarily from your meeting. Because your meetings are focused on newcomers, people with like 5 years or less or stuff like that. Since AA began, I've taken immense wallops in these areas because of my failure to grow up emotionally and spiritually. Remember, this is what Billy Wilson's telling me. This is the Billy Wilsons in my life that are calling me up now. How painful it is to keep demanding the impossible, how very painful to discover finally all along I've had the cart before the horse. What does that mean? I'll tell you what it means. It says, then comes the final agony of seeing how awfully wrong I've been. He wrote this when he had like 23 years sobriety. You know what he's saying? I got it all wrong. That's got to make you feel good. You guys are reading a book called As Bill Sees It. And here's Bill saying, I had the whole thing wrong. I had it all backwards. I'm unable to get off the emotional merry-go-round. It's got to make you feel good, right? I'm not saying the things that Bill wrote are bad or you shouldn't concentrate on or, as a matter of fact, this workshop used to be called, it used to be called the As Bill Sees It workshop. And it's now called something else. I can't remember what it's called. What is it? The Waymaker workshop. Because I stopped focusing. Because 10 years ago, I stopped focusing on Bill Wilson. I started focusing on the Lord. It seemed like a better deal. We all change. Keep on going. How to translate a right mental conviction into a right emotional result and so into easy, happy, and good living. Well, that's not only the neurotics problem, it's the problem of life itself for all of us who have got to the point of willingness, I think I put that, where is that? That's step 14. What is that? What step is that? Real willingness. Let me find it. I know I have it in there somewhere. Let me see. Here it is, the first one. Readiness to move forward. Wanting what he has, what the Lord has, what somebody else you found has that you don't have, and you're willing to go to any length to get it. Apparently, this idea of being willing to go to any length to get it even applies if you have 22 years or 30 years, even 40 years. You have to somehow develop a willingness to humble yourself, to ask for help, and maybe do things you wouldn't ordinarily do. I tell people all the time, you need to go to Bible study, start getting in the scripture, get serious about this thing. Say, well, yeah, I'm spiritual, not religious. I said, fine, then don't do it. That's all I got to give you. Have a nice life. Then don't do it. You're not willing. You're not ready to go to any length to get it, then I can't help you. We've got the point of real willingness to use the right principles of our affairs. Even then, as we do away, peace and joy may still elude us. That's the place so many of us AAs oldsters, old timers that come to, and it's a hell of a spot, literally. Now, I don't know what an old timer is. In AA, they consider, if you're at the International now, old timers, well, they used to be considered, unless they grazed the mark, 40 years or more. But quite frankly, you may consider yourself an old timer and have a lot of time if you got 10 years or 15 or 20 or 25, I don't know. How shall our unconscious, from which we have many of our fears, compulsions, and phony aspirations still stream, be brought into line with what we actually believe, know, and want? How to convince our dumb, raging, and hidden Mr. I becomes our main task. So I'm going to translate for you. We're crazy. We're insane. Our mind is corrupt. Only God can help us. We don't have the power to help us. And most of the crap that's going on in our mind, it comes from our subconscious, so we don't even know we have it. So you got 10 years and you're not drinking and they're patting you on the back and you're still crazy. And you don't know how to get rid of it because A is not working. Let's keep on going. The reason I know this stuff is because I've lived it, not because I'm smart. Listen, the reason I can talk about this stuff is not because I'm smart. The reason I can talk about this stuff is because I've gone through this crap. You got to go through it to appreciate it. I recently come to believe that this can be achieved. By the way, I recently come to believe that this can be achieved. I believe so because I begin to see many benighted ones, folks like you, make medicine get results. The reason I think it could be achieved is because I hung out with people that got past this. And I'm here to pass it on to you. Last thought, several years back, depression, having no really rational cause at all, almost took me to the cleaners. Now, I got to tell you something. I don't know. It's not for me to judge whether Bill Wilson had clinical depression or not. It's not for me. I know alcohol. I've heard more alcoholics to use the word depressed. I can't even tell you. Anytime everything was, I would call it, I said, I'm very depressed. I'm depressed. I couldn't do it. I was depressed. My husband left me. I was depressed. My wife left me. I was depressed. We sling around the words love and depressed like crazy. All I know is the only thing that helped Bill Wilson was coming back to focused belief in the Lord. It wasn't a pill. It wasn't a Xanax. It wasn't a psychiatrist. It was God. That's all I know. So I don't know whether there's real clinical depression or not. All I know is the only thing that helped him was the thing that helped him in the beginning, belief in God and faith in God. Last autumn, several years back, depression, having no really rational cause at all, almost took me to the cleaners. I began to be scared that I was in for another long spell of self-pity and depression. Considering the grief I had with depressions, it wasn't a bright prospect. Right? Keep on going. I can't, now here's the great thing. Bill Wilson, who wrote the big book? Bill Wilson. Who wrote the 12 and 12 that you're reading? Bill Wilson. Who invented, I don't want to say invented, who basically sat down with the step song, the suggested step song? Bill Wilson. Who sponsored people? Bill Wilson. Who was looked up to in the fellowship of alcohol science? Bill Wilson. Who went to a lot of meetings? Bill Wilson. Who was the biggest AA cheerleader in the world? Bill Wilson. Bill Wilson knew it all. So Bill Wilson comes up to you. He's coming up to you now, and he's saying, I got all these problems. I'm sucking my thumb. I'm going crazy. You know what I mean? I don't know what to do. So here's my question. So what are you going to do? So Bill calls you up on the phone. Some guy with 20, 30 years calls you up. What are you going to tell him to do? Do another 4-step? He says, I'm doing the 4 steps. Sponsor another person. I'm sponsoring 50 of them. You know? What are you going to tell Billy Wilson? Make a list? I kept asking myself, so why can't the 12 steps work to release depression? Why can't the 12 steps work to help you with self-pity? Why can't the 12 steps work to help you in a permanent, substantial way from the corrosive threat of fear? You got 5 years sobriety. You've done all the steps. You're still doing the steps. You're still going to meetings. How come you're still a banana? How come you're still unstable? How come you can't get any relief? You know, how come? I mean, we could say, well, sponsor one more person. And I'm not saying that's the wrong thing. Sometimes I say to people, I do it. Do a fourth step. I think you're confused. Let's see what's going on. I'm not saying the steps are wrong, but how come, when would you get to the point where you've done all this and you have 5, 10, 15 years and you're at the same point Bill Wilson was at? I kept asking myself, why can't 12 steps work to release depression? Well, one of the reasons I think is because I think there's really 15 steps, but that's besides the point. By the hour, I stared at the St. Francis prayer. Now, here's the deal. This is what Bill Wilson's saying, and I actually get it now. This helped me out a lot. I'm glad he wrote it down. He's sort of like my hero in that sense. He didn't quit. He wrote it down. He basically let everybody know what he was going through. That takes a lot. By the hour, he stares at the St. Francis prayer. That's the prayer in step 11, the prayer that everybody says they wish they knew. It's better to comfort than be comforted. Here was the formula, all right. But why didn't it work? You guys know the St. Francis prayer. Why isn't it working for you? Let's keep on going. Let's try to figure this out together. I realized what the matter was. He realized what the matter was. You ready? My basic law had always been dependence. Oh, we started out on dependence. Almost absolute dependence on people or circumstances to supply me with prestige, security, and the like. I'm dependent upon my boss. I'm dependent upon my company. I'm dependent upon my wife or my husband. I'm dependent upon people. I'm dependent upon my A group. I'm dependent on so many things, 24/7, always in my face. I go to an A meeting maybe for an hour a day or something like that. But all this other stuff, then I go out and I try to gather all this other stuff around me. I'm dependent upon all these things. And you know what the problem is? What Bill Wilson said, I needed God, I wanted God, and he's saying, but soon his presence was blotted out by worldly clamors, mostly with myself. The dependence on people, places, and things destroy faith in God. Dependence on people, places, and things destroy and obstruct your faith in God. You can't love God and money at the same time. You can't love and rely on God and getting laid at the same time. You can't love God and romance at the same time. You can't love God and think a man or a woman is going to cure you at the same time. It's God or nothing. He's the central fact of your life. You must be convinced he lives in your heart and mind in a way which would be miraculous. Now listen, you can call up New York and report me, but just make sure you tell him he keeps on quoting things from the big book about Alcoholics Anonymous. Just because you don't see it in the big book doesn't mean it isn't there. Right? So then I realized what my basic flaw was: dependence, failing to get these things according to my perfectionistic dreams and specifications I had bought for them. And when defeat came, so did my depression. Keep on going. There wasn't a chance of making the outgoing love of St. Francis a workable and joyous way of life until these fatal and absolute and almost absolute dependencies were cut away. Let's keep on going. So how are we going to cut them away? Now we're going to get into the solution. Because I had over the years undergone a little spiritual development. Okay, in other words, translated, that means because many of you guys that are at this meeting have some spiritual development to at least the point where you realize that there's still a problem. There's still a problem. That's why you're here, because you realize you have developed a certain amount of spiritual development where you can see the problem. You understand this stuff. The absolute quality of these frightful dependencies had never before been so starkly revealed. The longer you stay sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, the more you will see the problem. And if you don't do something about it, it will overtake you. There will come a time in every alcoholic's life will have no defense against the first drink. They will take you over. This world and the problems will take you over because your defense has to come from God. Reinforced by what grace I could secure in prayer. You see that thing, in prayer? In prayer. Not in money, not in property, not in prestige, not in a girlfriend. In prayer, I found I had to exert every ounce of action to clear off these faulty emotional dependencies upon. Now, here's the things that were the problem for Bill Wilson. You ready? His dependencies upon people, his dependencies upon AA. See, you guys are dependent on A to solve your problem. A is not going to solve your problem. AA has already solved your problem. You're not drinking. That's a symptom of the problem. A was going to solve the problem of not drinking. You with me? Ain't gonna solve your emotional problems, your feelings, all that stuff. Indeed, upon any set of circumstances, whatsoever. Then and only then could I free to love as Francis had. I had to be like St. Francis. I had to become St. Francis. I wanted what St. Francis had. Emotional, instinctual satisfactions I saw were really the extra dividends of having love, offering love, and expressing love appropriate to each relation of life. Plainly, I could not avail myself of God's love until I was able to offer it back to him by loving others as he would love me, and I couldn't possibly do that so long as I was victimized by false dependencies. You can't give up false dependencies unless you put something in its place that's real. And when you got to put it in its place that's real is God. And if you really don't know who God is and you don't have an image of God, you can never get rid of the worrying about money, people, places, or things. That's the bottom line. Who are you going to call? Ghostbusters? Keep on going. For my dependency meant demand, the demand for possession and control of the people and conditions surrounding me. While these words, absolute demand, may look like a gimmick, they were ones that helped to trigger my release into my present degree of stability. Whoa, here we go. Equanimity. Present degree of stability, quietness of mind, qualities which I am now trying to consolidate by offering love, keep on going, by offering love to others regardless of return to me. This seems to be the primary healing circuit and outgoing love of God's creation and his people by means of which we avail ourselves of his love for us. It is most clear that the current can't flow until our paralyzing dependencies are broken at depth. Only then can we possibly have a glimmer of what God's love really is. By the way, don't feel so bad if you have a little bit of a problem with this, because Billy didn't even talk about this until he had like 22 or 23 years. Okay, keep on going. In the first 6 months of my own sobriety, I worked hard with many alcoholics. Not one responded, yet the work kept me sober. The 12-step work kept me sober. It wasn't a question of those alcoholics giving me anything. My stability came out of trying to give, not out of demand that I received. Thus, I think it can work out with emotional sobriety. If we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we will find at the root of it some unhealthy dependency and its consequent unhealthy demand. Let us, with God's help, continuously surrender these hobbling demands. Then we can be set free to live, love, able to 12-step ourselves and others into emotional sobriety. I haven't offered you really a new idea. It's not a new idea. It's been around for thousands of years. It's just a gimmick. My brain no longer races compulsively into elation, grandiosity, and depression. I have been given a quiet place in the bright sunshine. Keep on going. Okay, here we go. This is the deal. It's in the Bible. Let's end with this. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the whole armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. It's not about the credit cards. It's not about the car. It's not about your husband or wife. Put on the whole armor of God, for our struggle is not against flesh or blood. It's against blood, but against rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and spiritual forces of evil in heavenly realms. You know, you guys talk about being spiritual. Let me tell you, there are spiritual forces of evil around you. You don't see them. You just feel the consequences of them. Therefore, put on the whole armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, in other words, have God live in your heart and mind in a way which is indeed miraculous. Focus on God so when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, have equanimity, and after you have done everything to stand. Stand firm then with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel. Gospel means good news, the good news of peace of mind. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all flaming arrows from the evil one. There's something evil going on out there. Take the helmet of salvation, which is the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. The Word of God is the Bible, and that's what that's what Bob Smith said. If you want to know about AA, read the Bible, read the good book. Seek the first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all things will be added unto you. That's first things first. And pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all the Lord's people. Not just at big book meetings, not just at meetings, not just the Serenity Prayer, not just the Lord's Prayer. Pray constantly. Let your life become a prayer. Don't turn over things to God. Live a turned over life. Make God the central factor. Wake up thinking about God. Go to sleep thinking about God. Go through the whole day thinking about God. How do you do that? You hang out with people who are doing that. And don't hang out with people that say, don't worry about God. Don't hang out with people that give God short shrift. Pray also for me that whatever I speak, words may be given me so that I would fearlessly make known the mystery of the gospel. Here's the mystery of the gospel. God is everything and I'm nothing, for which I am an ambassador in chains. Pray that I may declare fearlessly as I should. That's Ephesians. And that's it. And that's enough. You've now been given all the information you need to have equanimity. Whether you need it, whether you do it or not, that's up to you. It's not up to me. I just carry a message. That's my message. What does it say? We try to carry a message. I can't even carry it. I just try to carry it. I just expose it, and then you go ahead and look at the books and see whether I'm lying about this stuff. Okay, so this is what the old timers were reading. This is what the founders were reading, and that's it.